Hi, I'm Scott for ediblemusic.com. I was leading a mixing workshop the other day and I got a really interesting question about using compressors. As you've been learning how to use compressors, you've probably noticed that different compressors display their processing information differently. There are needles on some, then there are different kind of meters on the others. And the question was just about which one I prefer. And I have a couple of favorites, but I want to know what yours are too. They kind of divide into four different categories. The first one here displays the most crucial information: the threshold, the amount of gain reduction, and the output. Those 3 meters are what you need to be looking at first and foremost when you're applying compression. And this one gives it to you in a very simplistic way. There are a lot of compressors that use this. I use this a lot. The next one, as you can tell, this one is so different. This is called a transfer curve view. And what it shows is on the horizontal axis, that represents the volume heading into the compressor, while on the y-axis, it represents the volume heading out of the compressor. And what this line here means, there's this big circle here, that's basically the threshold point. And as you can see in these first couple of squares, before it hits that threshold, if the volume heading into the compressor is 1, then the volume heading out is going to be 1. If it's at 2, it's also going to be at 2. Then once it crosses here, say if the volume is at 5 now, heading into it, heading out of it, it's only going to be at about 3.5. So that's how to read that. I don't use this very often while I'm mixing, but it's really interesting to see, I think, as a way to understand what compression is doing. Maybe it's a useful way to learn how to use compression. And then you can also adjust the knee. As you can see, the knee is a relatively recent addition to compressor controls. And what it does is, with a softer knee, the compressor will actually activate a little bit before the signal reaches that threshold point. So usually it helps to get a smoother compression sound, as opposed to a hard knee where there won't be any compression until it hits that threshold point, and then it'll start there. So it has a very sharp point to the compressor. So in addition to the original, the kind of collapsed view that we saw, that was very basic. It has the threshold, the gain reduction, and the output meter. Those are still included here, but now we get this graphic chart. Very interesting. The third is the activity view. That's what Ableton calls it. And this lets us see the signal traveling over time. We can adjust the threshold graphically, and then we can see what effect the compressor is having on the signal over time. So compared to the first one, where we just have a singular, a singular meter, now we can actually see how the signal is traveling. And the fourth is a needle. And this isn't usually so much a matter of choice as much as if I choose a certain compressor, an analog model, then it's going to have a needle meter on it usually. And this one shows the same information as the first one, just in a different graphical form. In each of these cases, the compressor is still working in the same way. It's just displaying information about what it's doing differently. And I have a couple of preferences. I usually choose between this more simplified view and the activity view that shows you what's happening over time. Why? No reason, just personal preference. We've all got personal preferences. Those are the ones that I prefer to use. Which ones do you like? Tell me.